Maya had always been a planner. Her days were carefully mapped out, her life organized in neat, predictable steps. She prided herself on it, on being in control, on making sure everything fit into its rightful place. So, when her boss called, asking her to join an urgent business trip just days before their anniversary, she was thrown off balance. It wasn't that she didn't want to go. She had been working tirelessly for months, climbing the corporate ladder, finally catching the attention of higher-ups. The trip was a significant opportunity, one that could change the trajectory of her career. But as she stood in front of the mirror that morning, pulling on her blazer and adjusting her hair, she felt a pang of uncertainty she hadn't expected. The date on the calendar, April 15th, was now marked by a thin line of guilt. Her anniversary with Sam, the man she had promised to build a life with, was going to be spent apart. As she moved around the house, packing her suitcase in a rush, she realized something troubling. This wasn't the first time she had put her work ahead of Sam. There had been other occasions, small moments, too many to count, where she had chosen career over connection. The realization settled like a stone in her stomach. Her marriage, once the center of her world, had gradually become an afterthought in her busy, growing life. She didn't want to admit it, but there was a growing distance between them. Sam was patient, always understanding when she had to work, late or when she needed to travel for a project. But lately, it felt like his understanding had started to fade. His smile seemed less genuine, his words more distant. When was the last time they shared a quiet evening, just the two of them? She couldn't remember. Maya had been so caught up in the momentum of her own success that she hadn't realized she was losing touch with the man who had once been her everything. The final piece of her pre-trip routine was to pick up a bottle of wine, a simple gesture, a small token of their anniversary. She had seen it at the store earlier in the week, a bottle of Sam's favorite red, the one they used to share when they sat on the porch late at night. It was supposed to be a comforting, familiar reminder of better times. But standing in front of the shelves, picking up the bottle, Maya hesitated. The wine felt heavy in her hands, like a symbol of everything she was leaving behind. She could almost hear Sam's voice in her head. "We'll celebrate when you get back. It's just another day, right?" But it wasn't just another day. It was their day, a day that had been marked for years with small, intimate rituals that had, over time, become routine. As she checked out, Maya caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the store's window. Her face looked tired, her eyes too wide, as though she were seeing something she didn't want to face. Her life had become about achievements and deadlines, but she had never paused to check if Sam was still in the picture. Was he still the man she married, or had they both become strangers to one another, living parallel lives? She shoved the thought aside, as she often did when things became too heavy. She'd deal with it later, after the trip. She'd make up for the lost time, she promised herself. It would all work out. The flight to the city was uneventful, a blur of emails and presentations to prepare for. Maya sat quietly, her seat reclined slightly, gazing out of the window at the sprawling landscape below. She tried to push away the guilt gnawing at her. She was doing this for both of them, wasn't she? This trip would lead to something better, better opportunities, better life, one where she and Sam could finally enjoy the life they dreamed of. When she landed, her phone buzzed with a message from Sam. "I'll be here when you get back. Don't worry about me, just focus on the trip. We'll catch up soon." The words should have comforted her, but they didn't. Instead, they left her feeling hollow. They had become so accustomed to these exchanges. Short, brief, and impersonal. There was no longing in his text, no excitement at her return. It felt like a formality, a check-in, like they were both playing parts in a story that had lost its heart. Later that evening, she met with her boss, Greg, and the rest of the team for dinner. The conversation was light, filled with polite laughter, but underneath it, Maya felt a tension she couldn't ignore. Greg kept catching her eye, his gaze lingering a little longer than necessary. He spoke about his own marriage, about his wife, who had just had their second child. Maya smiled and nodded, but there was something about his words that made her uncomfortable. "I'm glad you're here, Maya," Greg said, his voice too soft. "You're a valuable part of the team. You've got that spark, that drive." Maya didn't know how to respond. She had always been driven, always had that spark, but she had never stopped to ask herself if it was enough. Was it enough for Sam? Was it enough for her? As the dinner came to a close, Greg suggested a drink at the hotel bar. "You've earned it," he said, a playful smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Maya hesitated. She didn't want to be rude, but she didn't want to be alone with him either. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to connect with someone, anyone, who might see her for more than just the woman at the top of her game. But as they sipped their drinks, Maya found herself caught in a conversation that was too personal, too revealing. She spoke of her marriage, her ambitions, and the quiet loneliness that had crept in over the years. Greg listened intently, his eyes softening with each word. The evening ended with a sense of confusion in Maya's heart. She wasn't sure why. She had let herself share so much, but part of her felt lighter, as though the weight of her own struggles had found a temporary outlet. But as she walked back to her room, her mind wandered back to Sam. She realized then that in the pursuit of everything she thought would bring her happiness, she had unknowingly lost the very thing that made her feel whole. She had a choice to make, but she didn't know how to make it. The days blurred together in a haze of conference calls, late-night dinners, and hurried discussions. Maya had come to the city with one goal in mind: impressing her superiors and proving that her rise within the company wasn't a fluke. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let this opportunity slip through her fingers. But as the days wore on, the excitement of the new challenge began to feel hollow. The noise of the city, the bright lights of the evening dinners, the busy hotel lobby, all of it felt like a distraction from something she couldn't quite place. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages, but it wasn't the work-related updates that tugged at her heart. It was the rare, brief messages from Sam. Each one felt increasingly distant, as if he was slowly withdrawing into himself. She could sense it even through the texts, the way he would reassure her without truly opening up. "I'm fine," he'd write. "Don't worry about me." It wasn't the words that stung. It was the emptiness behind them. Sam used to write her long, thoughtful messages, but now everything was clipped and functional. The warmth had drained out of their exchanges, replaced by a quiet resignation. One evening, after another exhausting day of meetings, Maya decided to take a walk alone. She stepped outside the hotel, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. The city felt alive, pulsing with energy, yet she felt a profound disconnect. She walked aimlessly through the streets, past bright storefronts, and into quiet alleyways where the sounds of the world seemed muffled. There was no one to talk to, no one who truly understood her anymore. She thought about Sam, about how they used to talk about everything, even the smallest things, about how they would spend hours together, side by side, as if nothing could come between them. Now, it felt like the distance between them was growing wider with every passing day, and she didn't know how to bridge it. Her phone buzzed again. Sam. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a video call. Maya stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the accept button. She wasn't sure she was ready for this, but she couldn't ignore it either. With a sigh, she tapped the screen. "Hey," she said, her voice soft. Sam's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, eyes red, his usually warm smile replaced by something more guarded. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice lacking the enthusiasm it once had. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. "How are you?" "I'm fine," Sam replied quickly, his eyes flickering toward something off-screen. "Just busy." She could hear the underlying tension in his voice. They had both been busy, yes. But what about the space between them? The silence that had become louder with every moment they spent apart? "I miss you," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam paused, his gaze flicking back to the screen, then away. "I miss you too," he said, but there was a hesitation there, a distance she couldn't ignore. Maya's heart sank. She wanted to reach out, to close the gap that had slowly grown between them, but she didn't know how. How could she explain the emptiness she felt? How could she tell him that every night she spent in this city, surrounded by people who admired her, she felt more alone than ever? The silence between them stretched, and Maya found herself looking away, unable to face the truth in his eyes. She had been gone for too long, and in that time, she had lost more than she realized. "So, what's going on with work?" she asked, her voice sounding artificial to her own ears. She wasn't interested in work right now. She wanted to talk about them, about their marriage, about the growing rift she could feel between them. But the words wouldn't come. "Same old," Sam said, forcing a smile. "You'll be back soon, right?" Maya nodded, though she wasn't so sure anymore. "Yeah, a couple more days." There was a pause. Neither of them knew what to say next. The conversation had run its course, and Maya realized she had become a stranger to Sam, and maybe he had become a stranger to her too. "Okay, I should go," she said quietly. "I'll talk to you later." "Okay, take care." The call ended, and Maya was left standing in the middle of the city, her heart heavy with unsaid words. What was happening to them? She had promised herself that this trip would bring her closer to her goals, to the future she had been working toward. But all she felt now was a sense of loss, of everything slipping away in front of her eyes. The next few days were no better. Maya went through the motions, attending meetings, smiling politely, shaking hands with clients, and listening to endless pitches. But her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Sam, or rather, the lack of one. That night, as she sat in the hotel room, preparing for yet another early morning of work, she received another message from Greg, her boss. "How about a drink?" The message read, "You've earned it. Come on, let's unwind. Maya hesitated. She hadn't had a drink with Greg since the first night. But this time, something about his invitation felt different. She didn't want to be alone. She didn't want to feel the weight of her loneliness pressing in on her. So, she agreed. They met at the hotel bar, and as the night wore on, Maya found herself drawn into conversation with Greg. He was charismatic, easy to talk to, and for the first time, in days, Maya felt a spark of connection. They spoke about their careers, their ambitions, their lives, but something about the way Greg looked at her made her stomach flutter. He wasn't just interested in the work, he was interested in her. Greg leaned in slightly, his voice lowering, as he spoke. You've got something special, Maya. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had never been one to flirt, but tonight, the attention felt intoxicating. The emptiness she had felt over the past few days seemed to disappear in the warmth of his gaze. She laughed lightly, trying to push away the guilt that crept into her chest. She shouldn't be here, shouldn't be enjoying this, but part of her, part of the woman she had become in this strange city, didn't want to stop. As the evening drew to a close, Greg stood. To leave. I'll see you tomorrow, he said with a smile, lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Maya smiled back, but as he walked away, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. This wasn't who she was, or at least, it wasn't who she used to be. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was the only connection that felt real anymore. That night, she lay awake in her hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of everything, of the trip, of Sam, of Greg, of herself, pressed down on her. What was she really searching for? And why did it feel like, the longer she stayed in this city, the further she drifted from the person she had once been? Maya didn't have the answers yet, but she knew one thing for certain. The woman she had been before was slipping away, and the woman she was becoming was terrifyingly unfamiliar. Maya's return was far from the triumphant moment she had envisioned. The airport was crowded with the usual throng of passengers, each absorbed in their own world. She had expected to feel a sense of relief as soon as her feet touched the ground, the familiar comfort of home wrapping itself around her. Instead, she was greeted by an uncomfortable silence that echoed louder than the bustling crowd. As she made her way through the terminal, her mind replayed everything she had left behind. She had been away for weeks, and during that time she had barely spoken to Sam. She couldn't remember the last time they had shared a conversation without the weight of unspoken things between them. The drive home felt like the longest journey of her life. The streets outside the car window looked the same, but everything had changed. Her marriage, her self-awareness, even the simple act of returning to the place she once called home felt unfamiliar. When she arrived, the house was eerily quiet. Sam's car was in the driveway, but there was no rush to greet her at the door. No hug, no warm smile, just the same empty air that had filled their home over the past few months. Maya hesitated at the door, her hand resting on the handle. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but she had hoped for something, some acknowledgement that she had been missed. She opened the door slowly, stepping into the familiar space that had once been a sanctuary for them both. "Sam?" she called, her voice tentative, unsure of what response she would receive. From the kitchen, she heard a muffled response. "In here," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. Maya walked toward the kitchen, each step heavier than the last. The room was dimly lit, with the faint smell of something burning. Maybe coffee, maybe something else. Sam was sitting at the table, his back to her. His shoulders were hunched, and he didn't look up as she entered. "Hey," she said softly, her heart tightening in her chest. Sam turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers for the briefest moment. There was no smile, no excitement, just a quiet resignation that seemed to hang in the air between them. "Welcome home," he said, his voice distant. "I wasn't sure when you'd be back." Maya felt the walls around her heart tighten. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" she said, trying to lighten the mood. "I thought we could have dinner tonight. Maybe open that bottle of wine, the bottle of wine she had bought before the trip was still sitting on the kitchen counter. It had remained untouched during her absence, a silent reminder of everything that had gone unsaid. Sam's gaze flicked to the bottle, and for a moment, Maya thought he might respond with some warmth, but instead, he stood up abruptly, walking past her without a word. "I'm not hungry," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Maya stood frozen, for a moment, her mind scrambling for the right words, the right thing to say to break the tension. But she didn't know where to start. Everything she had planned to say felt meaningless in the face of Sam's silence. The distance between them had grown into something unspoken but undeniable, and she wasn't sure how to bridge it anymore. "Sam," she began, but he cut her off. "Maybe we should talk," he said, his voice flat but firm. "Maybe we should have this conversation now." The words hit her like a cold wave. She had been dreading this moment, knowing deep down that something had shifted between them during her absence, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of Sam's words, the finality they carried. She had returned home, but it was clear that everything had changed, perhaps beyond repair. They sat down at the kitchen table, the tension thick in the air. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she tried to collect her thoughts. She wanted to explain, to apologize for the distance that had grown between them, but she couldn't find the words. What could she say? That she had been so absorbed in her career, so desperate to prove herself, that she had neglected the very person who had been her anchor. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice faltering. "I know I've been distant. I've been so wrapped up in work, in everything I thought would make our lives better, but I lost sight of what really matters. I lost sight of you." Sam's eyes softened for a moment, but the hurt was still there, lingering. "It's not just that, Maya," he said quietly. "It's not just work. It's the way we've been living. The way you've been living. I feel like I've been invisible to you. I've been here waiting, but you've been somewhere else. You've been gone." Maya's chest tightened, a lump rising in her throat. Sam was right. She had been physically present, but emotionally, she had checked out long ago. She had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, so focused on finding validation in her work, that she had neglected the most important thing in her life, her marriage. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "But I've been so caught up in my own ambition that I didn't see how much I was losing, how much I was pushing you away." Sam looked away, his jaw tightening as though he were struggling to keep his emotions in check. "Maya, I love you. I always have. But love isn't enough if we don't know how to be together, if we don't communicate, if we don't see each other for who we really are. The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they mirrored everything Maya had been avoiding. She had seen the cracks, but she had never acknowledged them. Now they were glaring, undeniable, and too big to ignore. I don't know how to fix this, Maya admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know where we go from here. Sam's gaze softened, but there was a sadness in his eyes that she had never seen before. I don't know either, he said, quietly. But I think we need to figure that out. Together. If we even can. The silence between them was deafening, each word they hadn't said weighing heavily in the room. Maya knew that everything had shifted, and the person she had once been, the woman who thought she could balance everything, was no longer the person Sam needed. But she was willing to try. She was willing to rebuild, if only he would let her. The question was, did they still have a chance, or had they both been lost for too long? The journey ahead felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Maya was ready to confront the truth. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she couldn't keep running from it any longer. The following days passed in a haze of uncertainty, and the quiet tension between Maya and Sam lingered, suffocating what little air was left in their home. Maya had hoped that their conversation at the kitchen table would be the start of something, the first step toward healing. But as the days wore on, nothing changed. There was no magic fix, no quick resolution. Instead, there was just more silence, more avoidance. And with every passing moment, the rift between them deepened. Maya tried, in her own way, to bridge the gap. She made dinner one evening, something they hadn't done together in months. She set the table with care, lit candles, and even opened the bottle of wine she had bought before her trip. But when Sam walked through the door, his face wasn't filled with the warmth she had hoped for. Instead, it was hard, distant. "I'm not hungry," he said before she could even offer the wine. He turned, walking past her and into the living room. Maya stood in the kitchen, the weight of his rejection settling around her. Her chest tightened, and the familiar sting of guilt wrapped around her heart. Was this how it was going to be now? Were they always going to be this way, lost in the spaces between them, unable to reconnect? But then, as if a flicker of hope sparked in her chest, Sam called out from the living room. "Maya, can you come here for a second?" She hesitated, but then her heart gave a small leap. Maybe this was it. Maybe this time they would finally talk. She walked into the living room, her heart racing, but when she saw Sam sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, her excitement faded. He wasn't looking at her. He was lost in the screen. "I need to tell you something," Sam said, his voice low. His eyes never left the TV, but there was something in his tone that made her stop. In her tracks. "What is it?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper, unsure of what was coming. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers for the first time in days. They were tired, as if all the weight of the past few months had finally broken through his carefully constructed facade. "I've been thinking about everything, about us, and I've realized something." Maya felt a cold rush of fear settle in her stomach. Her mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of the swirling emotions inside her. She had known this moment was coming, the moment when everything would finally come to a head. But nothing could have prepared her for what he said next. "I think we've been living in a lie," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I've been pretending everything is okay, but I've been holding on to something that isn't even there anymore." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She couldn't breathe. She had been dreading this moment, but now that it was here, she felt unprepared. "What do you mean?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling. "I mean that the connection we once had, it's not there anymore, and I'm not sure it can be fixed. Not like this." Maya's heart dropped into her stomach. For the first time, she saw the depth of the pain in Sam's eyes, the years of silent suffering, the weight of disappointment that had built up inside him. It was clear now that this wasn't just about the recent distance between them. It wasn't just about the missed anniversary or the hours she had spent working late. It was about the years of neglect, of taking each other for granted, of assuming that love alone could keep them together. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her throat tight. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't realize. I didn't see how much I was pulling away." Sam shook his head. "It's not just that. It's more than that. We've changed, Maya. You've changed. And I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know who we are anymore." Maya took a step back, her mind racing as the reality of his words sank in. She had thought she was doing everything right. Working hard, climbing the corporate ladder, making their future secure. But she had never stopped to think about the consequences of her choices. She had never stopped to think about how much she was losing in the process. "I've been so focused on the future," Maya said, her voice breaking. "I thought if I could just make things better, make more money, do better at work, then everything would fall into place. But I never stopped to ask if we were okay. I never stopped to ask if you were okay." Sam didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can trust that you'll ever be here, really here, with me again." Maya's heart shattered. She had been so blind to the growing divide between them, so focused on everything but him. And now, she realized, it might be too late to fix what had been broken. "I love you, Sam," she said, her voice raw. "I've always loved you. But I don't know how to make this right. I don't know how to fix all the things I've broken." Sam stood up suddenly, walking to the window. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared out at the night sky. Maya stood in the living room, feeling the distance between them stretch even further. "I don't know if we can fix it either," Sam finally said, his voice quieter now. "But I think we need to decide if we're willing to try. And right. Now, I don't know if I'm ready for that." Maya stood frozen, her heart aching in her chest. She had spent so much time trying to fix everything else in her life, but she had never truly tried to fix what mattered most, her marriage. And now, she was left standing in the ruins of it, unsure of how to rebuild. The silence in the room felt suffocating, and Maya knew that she couldn't ignore it any longer. The choice had to be made, and for the first time, she realized that it wasn't just about her. It was about them, about whether they could both find a way to start over, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But Sam's words echoed in her mind. "I don't know if I can forgive you." And she wasn't sure if she could forgive herself either. The days after Sam's revelation were the hardest Maya had ever endured. The quiet in their home felt suffocating, a constant reminder of how far they had fallen from the closeness they once shared. Sam went through the motions of daily life, making breakfast, working from home, barely speaking to her beyond the necessity of daily routines. Maya, too, found herself on autopilot, existing in a world of unfinished conversations and fractured hopes. Neither of them knew how to move forward, but the weight of the unspoken words between them pressed down on everything, even the smallest of actions. Maya was determined to fix things, but she couldn't quite find the right way. She had apologized, explained herself as best as she could, but nothing seemed to pierce the armor Sam had built around himself. Each time she tried to connect with him, there was a wall, an invisible barrier that kept her just out of reach. She didn't know if it was pride or pain that kept him from opening up, but it was clear that he wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. One evening, Maya returned from work, feeling more drained than usual. The exhaustion was not just physical, it was emotional, a weight she couldn't seem to shake. She had spent the day in meetings, pretending that everything was fine, that she could manage both her career and her personal life without consequence. But as soon as she walked through the door, she felt the tension in the air. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, that would signal they were still a family. Sam was sitting at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him, papers scattered around. He didn't look up when she entered, his focus entirely on the screen. For a moment, Maya wondered if he had even noticed she was home. "Sam?" she said softly, but he didn't respond. She felt a pang of frustration rise in her chest. She had been trying so hard to make things right, to bridge the gap that had formed between them, and yet it felt like he was slipping further away with each passing day. "Sam, can we talk?" Her voice trembled, betraying the vulnerability she had been trying to hide. He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "What about?" he asked, his tone distant. Maya hesitated. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times, but now that she was standing in front of him, the words felt like they were caught in her throat. "About us," she said quietly, taking a step closer to him. "About how we're not really here anymore." Sam sighed and closed his laptop, his fingers running over the edges of the keyboard as though it could somehow erase the weight of the conversation they were about to have. "I don't know what you want me to say, Maya," he said, his voice low and tired. "We're not the same people anymore. I don't know how to fix it." Maya's heart sank. "I don't either," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to try. I don't want to lose you, Sam." He stood up then, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Maya. I don't know if I can keep waiting for you to see me, to see us. It feels like you're always somewhere else, always focused on the next big thing. I don't know if I can keep living in the shadow of your ambition." The words hit Maya like a slap. She had always known on some level that Sam was hurting, that he felt neglected and unimportant in her life. But hearing him say it, hearing the raw pain in his voice, shattered something inside her. She had spent so much time thinking she was doing everything for them, for their future. But she hadn't realized that in doing so, she had been neglecting the present, the very thing that was slipping through her fingers. "I see you, Sam," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. I do. I didn't know how to balance it all. I thought that if I could make everything better for us, make more money, build a better future, that it would somehow fix what was broken. But I've been so focused on the future that I've lost sight of you, of us. Sam turned away, his back to her as if he couldn't bear to face her any longer. And now what? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. What's left for us? We've drifted so far apart, Maya. How do we even begin to rebuild something that feels like it's already fallen apart? Maya felt tears welling in her eyes. She had never felt more helpless. She had no answers for him, no solution that would magically fix everything. She had been so caught up in her own world, her career, her ambitions, that she had forgotten the most important thing. Their connection, their love, had to be nurtured, not taken for granted. I don't have all the answers, she said softly, her voice cracking. But I'm willing to figure it out with you. I don't want to lose you, Sam. I'm so sorry for everything I've neglected. For a long moment, there was silence between them, and Maya felt the heavy weight of all the missed opportunities, the unspoken words, pressing in on her chest. She wasn't sure how they would fix this, how they could come back from this. But what she did know was that she couldn't just keep pretending everything was fine. Sam slowly turned around to face her, his eyes soft but still guarded. I don't know if I can trust you again, he said quietly. I don't know if I can ever believe that you'll be here, really here, with me. Maya nodded, her heart aching with the truth of his words. I understand, she said, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to show you that I can change, that I can be here with you, if you'll let me. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't the same suffocating silence that had filled their house for weeks. It was different now, laced with the possibility of something new. Maybe it wasn't too late to start over, to rebuild what had been broken. But it would take time. It would take effort. And it would take more than just words. It would take action. And Maya knew that for the first time, she was ready to put in the work, to fight for what she had almost lost. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Maya was no longer afraid. She was ready to face the struggle, to rebuild their trust, and to rediscover the love that had once seemed so easy. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but she was willing to take it one step at a time, for herself, for Sam, and for the future they could still have together. The days following their conversation were filled with uncertainty, and though Maya had promised herself she would do whatever it took to rebuild her marriage, she couldn't shake the feeling that the damage might be irreparable. Sam's reluctance to fully engage with her, his quiet distance, haunted her every moment. They had made no promises. They had only agreed to try, to figure things out together. But trying was exhausting. Every day, Maya found herself wrestling with the same question. What happens if it's too late? She spent her evenings at home, trying to create moments of connection, but everything felt forced. The dinner table, once filled with laughter and shared stories, was now a battleground for silence. Maya would ask Sam about his day, only to receive one-word answers. She would make small gestures, lighting candles, leaving him little notes, but they always seemed to fall flat. The cracks in their relationship were not just visible, they were becoming a chasm. On the sixth evening after their conversation, Sam came home later than usual. Maya had prepared a simple meal, hoping this time might feel different. She had even picked up his favorite dessert, the one she knew always made him smile. But as soon as Sam entered the door, Maya could feel the familiar weight of his absence. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, almost mechanically. He didn't look at her, his eyes scanning the room in a way that felt more like an escape than a search for connection. Maya stood in the kitchen, staring at the plate of food she had carefully prepared, now cold and untouched. "It's fine," she said, though she knew it wasn't. Her heart twisted, the same knot of frustration tightening in her chest. What was the point? She had been trying so hard. She had been giving, apologizing, waiting, but nothing was changing. The distance between them wasn't shrinking, it was growing. As Sam walked past her, he paused for a moment, looking at the table. The dessert was there, untouched. The candle flickered between them, a sad reminder of what once was. "I'm not hungry," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Sam, please," she said, her voice trembling with desperation. "Can't we just try tonight? Just for tonight? Can we be here? Can we talk?" Sam's eyes flicked up, meeting hers for the first time that evening. But instead of the softness she had hoped for, there was a coldness in his gaze, something she couldn't quite name but immediately recognized. Resignation. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to try anymore. "I don't know what you want from me, Maya," Sam said quietly, his voice low and tired. "I don't know how much more I can give." Maya took a step back, the weight of his words landing on her chest like a heavy stone. For the first time in their marriage, she felt truly afraid. She had spent so much time focusing on fixing everything, on trying to rebuild what had been broken, that she had never once stopped to ask herself if it was even possible. Was it too late for them? Was there a point where you couldn't fix something anymore? "I'm not asking for everything, Sam," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm just asking for you to see me. I need to know that you're still here, that we're still us." For a long moment, Sam didn't speak. He simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. And in that silence, Maya realized something that she hadn't been able to face until now. She had been so focused on fixing their relationship, on mending what was broken, that she hadn't truly considered the reality of what Sam needed. What if Sam wasn't the only one who had changed? What if, in the process of trying to save them, she had become someone else entirely? Sam broke the silence, his words barely above a whisper. "I don't think I can love you the way you want me to anymore, Maya." Maya felt the words cut through her, sharper than any argument they had ever had. She wanted to cry, to scream, but instead she stood frozen, unable to move or speak. She had always believed that love, if it was real, could overcome anything. But now she was forced to confront the truth. Love could only survive if both people were willing to fight for it. "I'm sorry," Sam said, his voice strained, "but I think I've been holding on to something that isn't there anymore." Maya nodded, though her heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces. "I understand," she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew she didn't. She didn't understand how to let go, how to give up on the future they had once dreamed of. She didn't understand how love could fade like this, could slip through her fingers despite all her efforts. Sam walked past her, heading toward the door. "I need some space," he said quietly, not looking back. Maya stood there, alone in the quiet, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. Her mind spun, emotions colliding in a whirlwind. She had spent so much time trying to make it work, trying to fix the unfixable, but now it seemed that she had nothing left to give. It felt like a chapter closing, a door slamming shut, and yet she didn't know how to walk away. The realization hit her hard. Sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes, despite all the apologies, all the efforts, and all the desire to fix what had been broken, it simply wasn't meant to be. Maya sank to the couch, the weight of the past few months settling over her. She wasn't sure what came next, but she knew one thing: she couldn't keep fighting for something that wasn't there. And Sam couldn't either. She had a choice to make. She could hold on, fight for a love that might never return, or she could let go and finally allow herself the freedom to heal, to rebuild herself, to find the strength to move on. The decision wasn't easy, but as she sat in the quiet of their once shared home, Maya knew what she had to do. It was time to face the reality that sometimes love wasn't enough to keep two people together, no matter how hard they tried.